Welcome to this podcast in the Inclusive Diving series. Do you think you can't scuba dive if you are neurodivergent? Then think again. With the right teaching styles and risk analysis, they can dive safely and confidently. In today's episode, we're breaking down Teaching Neurodivergent Students to Scuba Dive by Dr. Mark Downs, emphasizing the importance of inclusive and supportive experiences. Let's dive in.
Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we are taking the stack of sources straight to the deep end, really. We're exploring a fascinating and maybe high-stakes collision point, recreational scuba diving and neurodiversity.
Yeah.
We've been immersed in this specialist guide, one written for dive instructors, and it's really grappling with how to champion inclusion, well, without compromising those fundamental safety standards. Life or death stuff.
That tension, that's really the heart of it, isn't it? It's the core of this whole deep dive. We're talking about neurodiversity, this idea that neurological differences like, say, ASD, ADHD, dyslexia,
Right.
they're just natural variations.
Right, variations in how our brains are wired.
Exactly. Natural human operating systems. These are functional differences, we should stress, not necessarily physical impairments. And the challenge is, well, how do these natural differences in processing or attention or executive function, how do they fare in a high-risk environment, an environment that demands absolute precision?
So our mission today is figuring out how we bridge that gap. And we're using a framework here that the guide emphasizes. It's key, instead of the traditional medical model.
Right, the one that might just say, nope, you can't dive because you have X condition.
Yeah, exactly. This guide adopts what's called the social model of disability.
And the social model really shifts the focus. It asks a different question. It asks, how can we adapt the environment? How can we adapt the teaching methods, in this case, dive training, to enable safe participation?
Okay.
The goal is to maximize participation by removing barriers, whether they're societal or structural. It's not about forcing the individual to conform to some rigid standard that might not even be necessary.
Okay, right. Let's unpack that. Let's start with the positive side then. What are the potential benefits? The guide mentions some profound outcomes for neurodiverse learners, particularly maybe those with ASD or ADHD.
Oh, absolutely. The underwater environment itself, it's a huge draw. For many, especially those with ADHD or certain traits of ASD, it can be incredibly therapeutic.
Therapeutic how?
Well, you've got the weightlessness, right? The muted sounds, the kind of visual simplicity of just blue. It acts almost like a form of sensory regulation. All that noise from the outside world, it just fades away.
So that quiet, that gentle pressure, it can be really calming. Meditative, even.
Exactly. And that can lead to improved focus, increased self-confidence, especially when they master new skills down there. It's this unusual kind of sensory input that kind of paradoxically seems to reduce anxiety for a lot of people.
Interesting.
And the sources specifically mention that for some individuals with ASD who might struggle with either too much or maybe too little sensory input, certain accommodations can turn the environment into a massive plus.
Like what?
Well, for instance, using a full face mask, that can help stabilize their sensory input. They don't have to manage a regulator constantly shifting in their mouth. It makes the whole experience more predictable and less anxiety-inducing.
I see. And it's not just the sensory side, is it? Diving's pretty structured.
Very structured. It requires coordination, fine motor skills. Think about buoyancy control. That's not easy.
Yeah.
And it operates within a really clear rule-bound framework, especially for interacting with your buddy, with your instructor.
Yeah.
It gives very clear, concrete objectives.
Okay, so lots of potential benefits, powerful motivators. But now we have to face that central conflict you mentioned, the demands of safe diving.
Right. And the sources are crystal clear on this. Scuba diving is a severe task-loading activity.
Task loading, meaning?
Meaning it puts a heavy demand on your brain's processing power. It requires highly effective executive function, planning, organizing, impeccable organization, actually,
Right.
and sustained attention, all under pressure in a place that doesn't forgive mistakes.
Right, the unforgiving environment. So here's where the stakes get high. The guide lays out, 8 crucial characteristics every safe diver needs. Preparedness, being safety conscious, calm under pressure.
Attentiveness, organization, all of those.
Okay, so looking at those, which ones clash most directly, perhaps even fatally, with common neurodivergent functional differences?
Well, I'd say attentiveness and observation are probably top of the list, hands down, particularly for individuals exhibiting traits common in ADHD.
Why specifically?
Forget complex stuff like navigation for a second. Just Think about basic safety checks. If a diver has real difficulty sustaining attention, monitoring their gas supply, checking their depth limits, these are non-negotiable, repetitive tasks. If that system fails...
Is it catastrophic?
Exactly. And the need to be meticulously organized and prepared. That clashes directly with challenges in executive function that some people face.
Wait a minute, though. If the risk is, as you say, potentially fatal, forgetting to check your air, making a critical error under stress, doesn't that suggest that some functional characteristics might be, well, fundamentally incompatible with independent diving, no matter how much structure you add?
That is the absolute critical question here. And the guide doesn't shy away from it. It gives a serious warning. It says characteristics often associated with ADHD, for example, significantly increase the risk profile.
Okay.
So adaptive teaching, it doesn't magically eliminate the risk. The goal is to mitigate it, to manage it. And ultimately, the instructor has to make a judgment call. Are these mitigation strategies enough? Can this student perform safely and independently, especially when things go wrong, under stress?
Which puts a huge weight on the teaching itself.
Precisely. It moves the issue squarely onto the teaching methodology.
So adaptive teaching, that's presented as the way forward. Flexible, responsive, tailored instruction. Let's break that down. How does the guide suggest instructors handle specific conditions? Maybe start with autistic spectrum disorder, ASD.
Okay, for ASD, the instructor almost needs to become a sensory architect. The challenges are often very specific, sometimes physical. Things like oversensitivity to touch. Think about a tight wetsuit neck seal.
Right, that can be really uncomfortable.
Extremely. Or noisy backgrounds. The echo in an indoor swimming pool. That can be overwhelming for some. Also, a strong need for routine and, crucially, literal interpretation of language.
Literal interpretation.
Yeah.
So no sarcasm.
Absolutely no sarcasm, no abstract metaphors, especially not when you're explaining an emergency procedure. Clarity is paramount.
So the strategies are,
Yeah.
well, they sound very practical. Minimize distractions. Soft lighting, maybe. Pre-wedding gear to reduce that initial shock.
Yes, things like that. And above all, visual supports are king. We're talking picture schedules, visual task lists, storyboards for every single skill. You provide those clear, concise, concrete steps, and you embrace repetition. Lots and lots of practice.
Okay. What about ADHD then? How does the approach shift?
With ADHD, the core challenges are often around inattention, impulsivity, acting without thinking through consequences, and again, organization.
Right.
And because the underlying risk is often making those careless mistakes that could lead to critical safety failures, the adaptive strategies really have to enforce external organization.
External organization. Making what exactly? Like tools and structure.
Exactly. Highly structured environments, very clear schedules, obsessive use of checklists, visual reminders. The training needs to be active, hands-on. Avoid long, rambling lectures.
Keep them engaged.
Right. Instructors might even use timers to manage transitions between tasks, set realistic timelines. It's all about externalizing that executive function, that planning and follow-through, which the student might struggle to maintain internally, especially under the demands of diving.
This is complex. And it brings us, I think, sharply to the issue of medical safety, which the guide flags is often complicated by comorbidity.
Yes, that's a really important point. It's common to have, say, ADHD and anxiety, or ASD and depression, and that combination definitely complicates the assessment.
And the guide raises a huge red flag around medications, doesn't it? Specifically, psychotropic drugs and diving.
A massive red flag. There's a profound knowledge gap here. There is almost no research into how increased ambient pressure, meaning diving depth, affects these kinds of medications.
And that's concerning.
Deeply concerning, because it could lead to completely unpredictable side effects underwater. Anything from increased susceptibility to nitrogen narcosis to dizziness, impaired judgment, even potentially triggering seizures in some cases.
Wow.
Yeah.
Are there specific types of medication that are highlighted?
Yes. Stimulants, often used for ADHD, things like Adderall or Ritalin, they can affect cardiovascular function, heart rate. That's a major liability, especially if there's an emergency underwater.
Okay.
And antipsychotics, anxiolytics. Well, they often cause drowsiness, dizziness, impaired coordination. Again, things that fundamentally compromise diver safety. There's also some concerning, though not conclusive, fatality data mentioned.
Fatality data.
Yeah, reviews of diver deaths in the Asia-Pacific region apparently found that deceased divers were taking significantly more psychotropic medication than average. Now, whether it was the medication itself or the underlying condition causing the problem, that's hard to untangle. But we do know panic is a factor in over 10% of dive deaths, and people with anxiety disorders might be more prone to panic.
So it's a complex picture medically. Who actually makes the call on whether someone is fit to dive? I mean, most divers just fill out that standard RSTC form, right?
Right. Many people can self-certify using that standard medical questionnaire. But for individuals with diagnosed neurodiversity, it often requires an assessment by a diving doctor, someone specializing in dive medicine.
And what does that assessment look like?
While often, even that assessment can be quite binary, fit or unfit. Which brings us back to the instructor. The crucial final safety decision rests squarely with them.
The instructor.
Yes, they are the ones on the ground observing the student. They have to determine if the student has truly grasped the concepts, developed the skills, and crucially, demonstrated the sustained competency to dive independently and safely.
That feels like the core insight here. The instructor isn't just teaching skills, they're the final non-binary gatekeepers.
Absolutely, and they have to be acutely aware. Certifying someone who isn't truly competent doesn't just endanger that student. It endangers their buddy, who relies on them, and potentially any rescuers who might have to intervene. It's a heavy responsibility.
It really is. Okay, we've established the huge responsibility, the risks.
Yeah.
But the guide also makes a really compelling point about not missing out on talent, right? Focusing purely on risk might mean overlooking some incredible strengths associated with neurodiversity.
Exactly, and we really need to talk about that side, too. Because it's significant.
This is where it gets really interesting for me. We know the neurodivergent brain often comes with exceptional traits. Things like creativity, specialized problem-solving skills, meticulous pattern recognition, and maybe most powerfully, hyperfocus.
Yes, hyperfocus. And think about how that translates to diving. That ability to adhere meticulously to a pre-dive checklist every single time, or to perform complex underwater navigation where sustained pattern detention is absolutely critical. These are core diving skills. And neurodivergent individuals, when they're properly trained using these adaptive methods, they can not only master these skills, but sometimes excel at them because of their wiring, not despite it.
The source material actually lists some pretty iconic figures whose unique way of thinking was linked to these traits. People like Albert Einstein.
Right. Retrospectively noted for traits associated with ADHD, dyslexia, and autism.
Yeah.
His intense focus, his different way of seeing things, it literally revolutionized physics.
And others, too, like Henry Ford.
Henry Ford, yeah.
No.
Reportedly struggled with dyslexia, but used repetition and rote learning methods that worked for him to build a manufacturing empire. Or think about Simone Biles, who's open about managing ADHD. Their success often comes from finding or creating environments that actually leverage their unique cognitive processes.
And there's even a business angle, that Cass Business School study.
Yeah, finding that something like 40% of top-earning, self-made entrepreneurs showed signs of dyslexia. It suggests that this kind of neurological difference isn't just something to be managed, it can actually provide a competitive edge in certain fields.
So it absolutely can be a strength.
It really can. The key takeaway here is that success often hinges on finding that sweet spot, that right intersection. Taking an innate ability like hyperfocus or pattern recognition and channeling it effectively through a highly structured adaptive teaching model that understands and accommodates the learner's needs.
Okay, so let's try to bring this together for you, the listener. What's the main takeaway from this deep dive? It seems clear. Scuba diving can be incredibly rewarding, even uniquely beneficial for neurodiverse individuals.
Definitely. Offering those unique sensory experiences, boosting confidence, things that might be hard to find elsewhere.
But, and it's a big but.
It's a huge but.
Yeah.
That success is entirely contingent on a dual commitment. First, rigorous safety assessment, especially considering those complex, often unknown risks around medication under pressure. And second, the instructor's unwavering commitment to personalized adaptive teaching. Strategies that make the learning environment genuinely safe and accessible for that specific individual. We have to meet the student where they are.
Which loops us back to that ultimate safety question. And it's also a complex legal one, which the guide touches on regarding capacity.
Yeah, that's a tricky area.
In adulthood, the legal principle generally starts by assuming someone has the capacity to make their own decisions.
Right. Correct. You assume capacity unless proven otherwise.
And if someone is assessed as having capacity, legally, it's their right to make what others might see as an unwise decision. We all do it sometimes.
We do.
Yeah.
And this raises a really profound, maybe provocative final thought for instructors, and perhaps for all of us involved in adventure activities. When you're certifying someone for an inherently risky, independent activity like scuba diving, Where does that individual's legal right to make potentially unwise choices meet the instructor's immense ethical and professional responsibility? That responsibility to prevent an incompetent diver from endangering themselves and, critically, their future buddy.
Wow, that line.
That line between personal liberty, risk acceptance, and professional duty of care. That's where the real deep dive begins, long after the training is over.
A very powerful place to leave it for today. Thank you. This has been incredibly illuminating.
My pleasure. It's important stuff to consider.
And thank you for joining us on the Deep Dive. We hope this gives you plenty to think about. We'll see you next time.
Well, that ends another podcast. We hope that you now have a better understanding of how those who are neurodivergent may safely scuba dive. If you are an instructor, then you have a better understanding and are better prepared. If you wish to be notified about our future podcasts, then please subscribe. Until then, safe diving.